Everything in my life begins in my mind, whether I am aware of it or not. Before any action takes place, before any habit is formed, before any success or failure shows up in my reality, there is a thought. That thought may be small, quiet, and easy to ignore, but it is powerful. It sets the direction. It decides whether I move forward or stay stuck. When I understand this, I realize that my mind is not just a part of my life. It is the control center of my life. Many people wait for circumstances to change before they change themselves. They wait for motivation, confidence, or opportunity to appear from the outside. But the truth is, nothing outside of me can permanently change my life if my thinking stays the same. If my mind is filled with doubt, fear, and excuses, I will find ways to sabotage even the best opportunities. On the other hand, when my mind is focused, disciplined, and intentional, I start creating opportunities instead of waiting for them. Every habit I have today was once just a thought repeated over time. Laziness did not appear overnight. Confidence did not appear overnight either. They were both built in the same place, the mind. When I allow negative thoughts to repeat without challenge, they slowly become beliefs. Those beliefs shape my actions, and my actions shape my results. That is how a life is built. Not in big dramatic moments, but in quiet thoughts I choose to entertain every day. The mind can be my greatest weapon or my greatest enemy. If I let it run without control, it will pull me toward comfort, fear, and short-term pleasure. It will remind me of past failures and convince me they define my future. But when I take control of my mind, I interrupt that pattern. I start questioning my thoughts instead of obeying them. I begin to ask myself whether a thought is helping me or holding me back. That simple pause creates power. Once I accept that my mind is the starting point, I also accept responsibility. I can no longer blame people, situations, or luck for where I am. This is not a burden, it is freedom. Because if my thinking helped create my current life, then changing my thinking can create a different one. That means change is always possible, no matter how far behind I feel. Controlling my mind does not mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing responses instead of reacting emotionally. It means training myself to look for lessons instead of excuses. It means reminding myself that discomfort is often a sign of growth, not failure. When my mind understands this, challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like tests I can pass. Success, confidence, discipline, and resilience all begin as decisions in the mind before they ever show up in behavior. I do not wake up one day and suddenly become strong. I think strong thoughts first. I do not suddenly become consistent. I first decide mentally that quitting is no longer an option. That decision may not change everything instantly, but it changes the direction, and direction is everything. When I control my mind, I take control of my future. I stop living on autopilot and start living with intention. My life begins to move where my thoughts lead it. That is why mastering my mind is not optional. It is the foundation of every meaningful change I want to make. Thoughts move through my mind constantly, often without invitation or warning. Some are useful, some are negative, and many are simply reactions to past experiences. The mistake I used to make was believing that every thought I had was true and deserved my attention. Over time, I learned that this belief quietly steals control of my life. A thought is not a command. It is only a suggestion, and I decide whether to accept it or let it pass. Just because a thought appears does not mean it defines who I am. Fearful thoughts do not mean I am weak. Doubting thoughts do not mean I am incapable. They are habits of the mind built from past moments, opinions, and failures. When I understand this, I create space between myself and my thoughts. That space is where freedom begins. In that space, I gain the power to choose rather than react. Many people live trapped inside their own minds, constantly replaying mistakes and worst-case scenarios. They allow one negative thought to grow into a story that controls their mood, confidence, and decisions. But when I step back and observe my thinking instead of identifying with it, I weaken its control. I remind myself that I am the thinker, not the thought itself. Choosing my thoughts requires awareness. I must first notice what I'm telling myself, especially in difficult moments. When things go wrong, my mind often jumps to blame, self-criticism, or fear of the future. If I do not catch those thoughts early, they shape my behavior without my permission. Awareness is the first step toward discipline. Without awareness, there is no choice. Once I become aware, I can challenge my thoughts. I ask simple but powerful questions. Is this thought based on facts or emotion? Is it helping me grow or holding me back? Would I say this to someone I care about? Many negative thoughts fall apart when questioned. They lose their authority when I refuse to accept them as truth. Controlling my thoughts does not mean forcing positivity or pretending I never struggle. It means choosing constructive thinking over destructive thinking. It means replacing thoughts of failure with thoughts of learning. It means shifting from I can't to I will try, and from this is impossible to this is difficult, but I can improve. These shifts may seem small, but repeated daily, they reshape my mindset. The voice inside my head speaks more often and more loudly than anyone else in my life. If that voice is harsh, critical, and discouraging, it slowly drains my confidence. When I change that voice, I change how I show up in the world. Encouraging self-talk builds courage. Calm self-talk builds clarity. Honest self-talk builds strength. Choosing my thoughts is an ongoing practice, not a one-time decision. Some days my mind is calm and focused. Other days it fights back with old patterns. On those days, discipline matters more than motivation. I do not need to feel confident to think confidently. I need to act with intention even when my emotions resist. When I stop believing every thought, I stop being controlled by fear, doubt, and past mistakes. I begin to respond to life instead of reacting to it. I become grounded, focused, and intentional. That is the power of realizing that I am not my thoughts. I am the one who chooses them, and that choice shapes my life. My attention is one of the most powerful tools I possess, yet for a long time I treated it casually. I allowed my focus to drift toward problems, fears, and distractions without realizing the consequences. Whatever I consistently focus on becomes larger in my mind, stronger in my emotions, and more influential in my actions. This is not accidental. Focus gives energy, and energy creates growth. When my attention stays locked on problems, those problems begin to feel heavier than they actually are. I replay them in my mind, analyze them from every angle, and imagine worst-case outcomes. The situation may not change, but my stress increases, my confidence drops, and my ability to act weakens. In contrast, when I shift my focus towards solutions, learning, and progress, my mindset changes. I feel more capable because I'm training my mind to look forward instead of inward. Focus shapes perception. Two people can face the same challenge and experience it completely differently based on what they choose to focus on. One focuses on the risk and feels paralyzed. The other focuses on the opportunity to grow and takes action. The difference is not talent or luck. It is attention. Where attention goes, interpretation follows, and interpretation determines response. In daily life, my focus is constantly being pulled in different directions. Social media, comparisons, opinions, and noise compete for my mental energy. If I do not choose my focus intentionally, something else will choose it for me. That is why unfocused living leads to frustration. The mind becomes cluttered, scattered, and reactive. Clarity comes when focus becomes selective. Focusing on improvement instead of perfection changes everything. When I obsess over being perfect, I focus on fear of failure. That fear slows me down and creates hesitation. When I focus on getting slightly better each day, progress feels achievable. Momentum builds. Small wins create confidence, and confidence fuels consistency. Focus also determines emotional strength. When I focus on what I cannot control, I feel powerless. When I focus on what I can control, my actions regain meaning. I cannot control other people's opinions, the past, or sudden obstacles. I can control my effort, attitude, and preparation. Directing my attention there builds resilience instead of frustration. Gratitude is another example of how focus changes experience. When my attention is fixed only on what is missing, life feels empty, no matter how much I achieve. When I intentionally focus on progress, lessons, and what is already working, my mindset shifts. This does not mean I stop wanting more. It means I stop letting dissatisfaction dominate. My thinking. Focus also influences identity. If I constantly focus on past mistakes, I begin to see myself as a failure. If I focus on lessons learned, I begin to see myself as someone who grows. Identity is not fixed. It is reinforced by repeated focus. What I pay attention to today becomes part of who I believe I am tomorrow. Training focus takes practice. The mind naturally wanders toward comfort and negativity. Redirecting focus is not about force, but about repetition. Each time I notice my attention drifting toward unproductive thoughts, I gently bring it back to what serves me. Over time, this becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a mindset. When I control my focus, I control my growth. I stop feeding fear and start feeding progress. The world around me may not change instantly, but my ability to handle it does. What I focus on grows, and when I choose wisely, my life grows with it. The limits I once believed were fixed were mostly created by my own thinking. They felt real because I repeated them to myself for years. I told myself what I could not do, what I was not good at, and what kind of future was realistic for someone like me. Over time, those thoughts became invisible boundaries. I stopped reaching beyond them, not because I was incapable, but because I was convinced I was. My mindset acts like a lens through which I see the world. If that lens is narrow, everything looks restricted. Challenges appear larger, risks seem dangerous, and effort feels pointless. When my mindset expands, the same challenges look manageable, the risks look calculated, and effort feels worthwhile. Nothing outside changes immediately, but my interpretation does, and interpretation controls action. Many limits are inherited rather than proven. They come from childhood experiences, comparisons, past failures, or other people's opinions. A single failure can convince the mind that it represents permanent inability. One critical comment can become an internal voice that repeats for years. When I accept these messages without questioning them, I allow someone else's perspective to define my potential. A fixed mindset avoids difficulty because it sees struggle as proof of weakness. A growth-oriented mindset understands that struggle is part of progress. When I change how I view effort, I stop fearing it. I no longer see discomfort as a signal to quit, but as evidence that I am stretching beyond old limits. That shift alone unlocks new levels of performance. Belief shapes persistence. If I believe I am capable of improvement, I stay engaged longer. I practice more, learn from mistakes, and recover faster from setbacks. If I believe my abilities are limited, I give up early and call it realism. The result looks like a lack of talent, but the cause is a lack of belief. My mindset also influences how I respond to failure. Failure can either reinforce limits or redefine them. When I view failure as proof that I am not good enough, I shrink my goals. When I view it as feedback, I adjust my approach. The event stays the same, only my interpretation changes, yet the outcome becomes completely different. Fear thrives in a limited mindset. It exaggerates consequences and minimizes ability. It convinces me that rejection will destroy me, that embarrassment is unbearable, and that trying is riskier than staying still. When I challenge these thoughts, fear loses its grip. I realize that most of the consequences I imagine never happen, and even when they do, I can handle them. Expanding my mindset requires deliberate effort. I must regularly question the stories I tell myself. I replace "I can't" with "I can learn." I replace "this is too hard" with "this will take time." These are not empty phrases, they are mental commitments to stay in the PR. Assess instead of retreating from it. Growth does not come from comfort. When I avoid situations that test me, my world becomes smaller. When I step into challenges with the belief that I can adapt, my world expands. Confidence grows not from winning every time, but from knowing I can handle setbacks and keep moving forward. When I change my mindset, my limits change with it. What once felt impossible becomes difficult. What felt difficult becomes manageable. What felt manageable becomes routine. This is how progress happens, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through a steady expansion of belief. My mindset does not just influence my life. It sets the boundaries of what my life can become. The way I speak to myself quietly shapes every part of my life. Long before anyone else offers an opinion, my inner voice has already judged my abilities, my effort, and my chances of success. That voice is always present, commenting on every mistake and every challenge. When it is negative and harsh, it drains my energy and weakens my confidence. When it is supportive and honest, it becomes a source of strength. Self-talk is powerful because it feels personal. I do not question it the way I question others. If someone else tells me I am not good enough, I may disagree. When I tell myself the same thing, I often accept it as truth. Over time, these repeated messages shape my beliefs, and beliefs guide behavior. This is how self-talk slowly builds the future, one sentence at a time. Negative self-talk often sounds reasonable. It disguises itself as realism or self-awareness. It says, "I am just being honest, protecting myself from disappointment." In reality, it keeps me small. It reminds me of past failures while ignoring growth. It exaggerates weaknesses and dismisses strengths. When I allow this voice to dominate, I hesitate more, take fewer risks, and settle for less than I am. Capable of changing self-talk does not mean lying to myself or pretending I am perfect. It means speaking with fairness and intention. Instead of attacking myself for mistakes, I focus on learning. Instead of saying I always fail, I acknowledge progress and effort. This shift creates emotional balance. It keeps me accountable without destroying my confidence. The words I repeat internally influence how I handle pressure. In difficult moments, my inner dialogue determines whether I panic or stay composed. If my self-talk says I cannot handle this, stress takes control. If it says I have faced worse and survived, calm follows. The situation may be intense, but my response becomes steady. Self-talk also shapes discipline. When I wake up tired or unmotivated, the conversation in my head decides whether I act or delay. If I speak to myself with encouragement instead of excuses, I move forward despite discomfort. Discipline grows when my inner voice supports effort rather than comfort. Many patterns of self-talk come from the past. They are echoes of criticism, comparison, and disappointment. Recognizing this helps me stop treating those thoughts as facts. I did not choose many of these messages, but I can choose whether to continue repeating them. Awareness gives me the chance to rewrite the script. Replacing negative self-talk takes consistency. I notice when my inner voice becomes extreme or unfair. I interrupt it and replace it with language that pushes me forward. Over time, this practice becomes natural. The voice in my head becomes calmer, clearer, and more constructive. The way I talk to myself affects how I talk to others and how I show up in the world. Confidence begins internally. When my inner dialogue is respectful and encouraging, I stand taller, speak more clearly, and take more initiative. People respond to that energy, but it begins with me, my foo. Tour is shaped by the conversations I have with myself every day. If those conversations are filled with doubt and criticism, progress feels heavy. If they are filled with purpose and belief, progress feels possible. Self-talk is not just background noise, it is direction. And when I choose my words carefully, I choose a stronger future. Real change is not created in one dramatic moment. It is created through small, repeated choices made every day. Controlling my mind is not something I achieve once and then forget. It is a daily responsibility. Each morning I decide whether I will let my thoughts run on autopilot or whether I will guide them with intention. That choice, repeated over time, determines the direction of my life. Many people wait for motivation before they act, but motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes depending on mood, energy, and circumstances. Mental control is different. It is discipline. It means doing what supports my growth even when I do not feel inspired. On the days when my mind wants comfort, excuses, or distraction, discipline steps in and keeps me aligned with my goals. Daily mental control begins with awareness. I pay attention to what I consume mentally, including conversations, media, and my own thoughts. Not everything deserves access to my mind. When I allow negativity, comparison, and chaos to dominate my attention, they shape my emotions and decisions. Choosing what I allow in is a form of self-respect. Consistency matters more than intensity. A single positive thought will not change my life, just as a single negative thought will not destroy it. The power lies in repetition. When I consistently redirect my thinking toward growth, responsibility, and progress, those patterns become natural. Over time, my default mindset shifts, and what once required effort becomes automatic. Daily habits of the mind create identity. When I repeatedly choose patience over reaction, focus over distraction, and effort over avoidance, I begin to see myself differently. I stop seeing discipline as something I force and start seeing it as part of who I am. Identity changes behavior more effectively than willpower alone. Mental control also helps me navigate setbacks. Life will not always cooperate with my plans. There will be stress, failure, and unexpected challenges. Without mental discipline, these moments can knock me off course. With it, I respond with flexibility instead of frustration. I adjust instead of quitting. I learn instead of blaming. Rest and recovery are also part of mental control. Discipline does not mean constant pressure. It means knowing when to push and when to pause. When I listen to my mind and body, I avoid burnout and maintain balance. Sustainable growth requires both effort and care. The way I end each day matters as much as how I begin it. Reflecting on my thoughts and actions helps me stay accountable. I notice patterns. I recognize progress. I identify areas to improve. This reflection turns experience into learning and prevents repetition of the same mistakes. Over time, daily mental control creates confidence. Not the loud kind that depends on praise, but quiet confidence built on trust in myself. I know I can handle challenges because I have done it before. I know I can stay consistent because I practice it every day. This confidence becomes the foundation of long-term success. When I control my mind daily, I stop chasing quick fixes and start building lasting change. My life does not transform overnight, but it moves steadily in a better direction. Small choices compound. Thoughts shape habits. Habits shape character, and character shapes destiny. This is how lifelong change is created, one intentional day at a time.